Yo, yeah, y'all know what time it is.
Hi, and welcome again, joining me and my co-host, Katie O'Neill, with Kiss My Keister.
For another installment of our hilarity, we hope you'll stick around and enjoy the fun that we have. Today's episode is going to be brought to you by our hosts and our station. And we're going to start out by thanking Colette Darville with Yin Yo the Lifestyle. She's going to sponsor our shows today, and be sure and listen to her on Spreaker, on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio. She's got a great following, and if you like yoga, she's your girl. Joe, thanks for coming back in today.
Well, you know, it's just another lovely day in Florida. I had to come back.
Awesome. What's going on?
So, Katie, over the last couple of days, I kind of looked at some things, and after our last episode, I kind of thought about certain things that we were talking about that kind of rung a bell with me, but I have to bring this up because this is hilarious, because even though we talk about COVID all the time and all this other stuff, did you know that the seasonal flu has hit the record low now because there have been flu cases as anything because of all the 6 feet distancing?
Do you think there's a possibility that some of these flu cases could be COVID or mistaken as COVID?
It could be, but it also, because of this, it actually has detracted from STDs and everything else, too, because everyone's been 6 feet apart.
Okay, good point. Good point.
So I thought that was really good. Another thing, like I said, we were talking about last week about old times and all this other stuff that brought back memories.
Good segue to STDs.
I know, right?
Yeah.
Good old days. Back in the 70s.
Yeah, let's go back to that.
Oh, yeah. But, I thought it was really interesting that we talked about movies. And there's 2 things that kind of came up with not just movies, but also another thing that kind of touched the heart. But video games. Video games, I noticed, are getting a little bit more too violent, and they're getting a little bit more explicit. Not that I'm saying anything, but for my job, I have to look at YouTube sometimes, and I have to get ideas for marketing. And, of course, the algorithms of YouTube just populates games and all this other stuff that you want to previously look at, whatever. Well, there was a fighting game, not giving its name away, and it showed 2 skimpily clad ladies, one in a sex outfit, fighting another one. Let me tell you, that was a little bit, whoa.
Coming from a guy, I find that very interesting.
No, to me, that's fine. But I'm just imagining in my head, maybe it's because I'm older in my years, and I'm thinking, if this was my child playing this game, would I want them to watch that? Probably not.
Well, we've been having the same argument for about the past probably 30 years or more because of the gang violence in the video games that started out, what was it, street car races or...
I mean, are you talking about Grand Theft Auto?
Yeah, that one. That's the one. See, I don't play with those. If I want to be scared, all I have to do is get in my car and drive to work. That's enough to frighten me. I don't need any help over that. But my concern is that it's not just a matter of the violence in there, but it promotes gang activity.
Well, I think it also has to do with the fact of, just as we just mentioned before, that if I was a parent and wanted my kids to watch that, there would be some really seriously considerations I have to do. But in a sense, what has happened over the last couple of years that hasn't transpired when we were growing up?
Kids got tired of playing Frogger?
Well, that's one, but parenting 101.
Parenting 101 should have been done in high school before they ever graduated. We used to have to carry around an egg, a sack of flour, and that was our baby, and we had to feed it. We had to find babysitters for it. We had to bathe it, put a towel around it, fix its hair, do everything you would normally have to do to care for a child, which probably explains why I only had one.
And it was probably a good cake.
Well, she turned out to be a good cake, I'll put it that way.
That's good. But yeah, I'd never had the experience of caring for an egg or a sack of flour, but they taught us home economics and other housekeeping type things to prepare us for home life, in a sense, in my middle school, high school years. But in a sense, I'm just thinking off the top of my head that if I was a parent, there are certain things I want them to know. So, example, back in the day when I'll go with around my age with the 80s and 90s and all this other stuff, there are a lot of violent movies, a lot of violent cartoons like Tom and Jerry we talked about, and a lot of other things that were very, even if I went back to like Three Stooges where they're hitting each other with a hammer, we laughed, we had fun with it, but God forbid if I were to hit my sibling with a hammer, I would have gotten in trouble or I would have got something much worse.
Well, the difference is when you're watching TV, you have this sense of that it's not real. And then when you're with your little brother or little sister, you have to try it because you saw it. Now, all things considered, first time that kid gets hit with a hammer or hits a kid with a hammer, what's going to happen to that kid?
Oh, there's a lot that could happen.
Absolutely. There's two endings to this. The kid gets away with it and does it again, or...
we don't know.
We don't
but
know.
We'll talk a little bit more in a second on this segment because this is a really good content. I love this.
Okay, so we'll be back in a few minutes.
Imagine being fired because of who you love. Imagine being denied medical treatment because of who you marry. Imagine being evicted because of who you are. Millions of Americans don't have to imagine this. They have to live it. Because in 31 states, it's legal to discriminate against LGBT people. Get the facts at beyondido.org. Brought to you by the Gill Foundation and the Ad Council.
And we're back with Kiss My Keister. Thanks, everybody, for coming back today. We're having some fun here talking about video games and parenting issues. I'm sure that there are a lot of parents out there who think they know it all. And there are probably a few out there that don't have any clue. And as much as I hate to admit it, I was one of those parents. I didn't have a clue. I was married at 17, a mother by 18, and a widow by 19. I knew nothing. I got slam dunked with everything all at once, so I guess the rest of my life went okay.
So what I heard out of there, 17, 18, 19, you're a widower. So what were you, a black widow? I'm just throwing that out there.
No, but I did lose my husband when I was 19 years old.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So I parented by myself. So my ideas of parenting are probably a little different than those of the average couple out there.
Exactly. But as I was stating earlier, was the fact of the matter is parents back then, they would tell their kids right and wrong and say, if you did something wrong, you would get smacked, you would get, punished, you would be grounded, whatever. You don't see that in today's society. I think I noticed some changes in it in like the mid-90s, latter half of 90s, where it started fluctuating.
Well, there's something to be said for that smack on the butt. There really is. Spare the rod, spoil the child.
Well, here's a funny story for you, okay? Now, as a child, I had gotten smacked if I was out of place. And I still remember a funny story is when I was in a mall in Delaware with my aunt, my mom, and my father. We were walking in one of the malls, and we're walking by KB Toy Stores. Now, that's an old store. Let's talk about that. And I remember I wanted to go in there for something. I can't remember if it was an action figure or some kind of game. I don't remember. And I was just like, I want to go in. And they just kept, no. Well, I just put up such a scene. My father, who's never raised a hand on me in his whole life, came up and smacked me in the back of the head as hard as he can. Next thing out of the mall, I hear child abuse being screamed. Child abuse. And it was this old lady out of the corner screaming, pointing at my father. My father looked and said, does he look abused? Shut the hell up. And then he walked away, and we walked away. And I was like, well, that goes to show you, you just can't do those things.
Well, one of the biggest problems we've had for, I would say, probably a few millennia is people butting in where they don't belong.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, it's one thing if you see someone like beating someone down to a bloody pulp. Mm-hmm. That's one thing. But if you see someone getting smacked in the back of the head once and saying, keep moving, that's to me is nothing.
I'm sorry, but when your child is reaching out at the impulse buy section at the checkout counter, I'm going to smack my kid. I'm going to tell him, no, you can't do that because it's rude, it's impolite, You don't have the money to pay for it. So it's not a matter. Here's where I think everything fell apart. Parents never told their children why. They always said, because I said so, and that's enough.
Well, here's the other nail in the coffin, if you want to say this. My mom worked for a local school district up north, and they would have, like, the cops come in, they would talk to the elementary kids and all this other stuff. Well, the cops even told the kids in elementary that if you think you're being abused and all this other stuff, you should call. So they've already empowered these kids to call cops when the kids really don't understand what abuse really is. Mm-hmm. So now, if a parent were to smack their child, the first thing the kid would do, pick up the phone and say, I got smacked, I got abused. Mm-hmm. Now the cop's going to show up at their house and say, excuse me, you abused your child?
Mm-hmm. And I'm going to tell that cop exactly what that kid did and why I smacked her butt.
And actually, to tell you the truth, I read an article not so long ago about some kind of situation like that where a kid reported their parents, and what did the cops do? The cops corrected the kid, saying, do not call this number again for this type of incident, and that was it. Because it's like the boy crying wolf.
Well, of course it is. Of course it is. I mean, I've got a nephew of my own who decided to call the police on a kid in the neighborhood who threw a baseball at him. The cop had to literally take the boy off to the side and say, look, I understand your concern, but this is not against the law. This needs to be handled parent to parent. This has nothing to do with the police. So that was the end of that. How in the hell did we get stuck on this topic for so long?
I don't know, but isn't it a great topic? But let's move on. So I thought another thing that we'd like to talk about, like remembering in the past and all this other stuff, movie theaters. Movie theaters now are being so heavily impacted that they're closing down for so long time that some movie theaters are actually re-renting their spaces, trying to get people to come back in for meetings and all this other stuff. But I
don't think they're ready for that yet.
Yeah, well, maybe some theaters aren't, maybe some are. I don't know. But here's the main thing. I just saw today that Mulan, the live-action movie that they're going to re-release for Disney, is going to go right to streaming automatically on Disney+. Mm-hmm. So does this mean that movie theaters are a thing of the past that we're not even going to do anymore?
I think there's a real possibility of that, but in the same respect, I think it could also bring back the drive-in.
You read my mind, Katie.
I love drive-ins. I have since I was a little kid. The first movie I ever went to see at a drive-in was Mothra.
Oh, so you're a Godzilla person like me, huh?
Oh, my parents were. They would pop a bag of popcorn in one of those giant paper grocery bags, load it up with a 6-pack of sodas, and we would go to the drive-in. All of us kids would sit in the back. Mom and Dad were up in the front, and the most unruly child would end up in the front with Mom and Dad. Me, I went to sleep a lot because it was quiet, it was dark, and it was peaceful.
So what I'm hearing is you didn't really see the movie. You just saw like the probably beginning previews and fell asleep?
No, that's not necessarily so because I did see Wasp Woman.
Oh, okay.
So they were horror freaks as well. And I think I graduated from drive-ins to a walk-in theater when I was about 8. And my first experience in that theater was The Blob. So after that, we actually got taken to a fine theater in downtown, and we watched House of Wax with Vincent Price. I ended up on the lady's lap eating popcorn most of the movie. I was very frightened by that.
I can see that, but here's another fun tidbit about The Blob is I'm originally from Philadelphia, PA, and The Blob was filmed in Phoenixville, which is like an offset, a little far off from Philly, not by like an hour or so. Mm-hmm. But every July, they would do Blob Fest. And what they would do is, since it was filmed in the movie theaters, they would do it for the whole weekend. But from Friday, they would close down the street and they would imitate the people running out of the theater as if the Blob was coming in.
Awesome.
Exactly. And inside they'd have all those decorations of the Blob, and they would have old horror movies that would be playing in there with the Blob. So you'd watch the Blob and you watch another horror movie plus another one for like $7-8, which you couldn't beat at that time.
$70?
No, $7 to $8.
Oh, $7 to $8.
Not $70. Holy crap!
Oh my
no.
God!
No.
It cost us $0.25 each to get in. I